I'm joined by Boston Herald sports columnist Steve Buckley. And Buck, over the years, you've written on everything: Celtics, Red Sox, Patriots, Bruins.
You name it, I've done it all. Yeah.
Over the years, but you've shifted focus with a series of columns that you're doing now about some individuals around the Boston area who are fighting ALS, a terrible disease that Pete Frates really brought and raised awareness to several years ago with the Ice Bucket Challenge. My first question to you is, what made you want to write these columns?
Well, you know, it's funny, you opened up this interview by saying I've covered all these sporting events, and the bedrock of this series was the fact that I covered sports. Pete Frates played baseball at Boston College. John Martin, the Nesson cameraman, I've known, and I call him cameraman because that's his title for himself, because I've covered sports with John for years and years. And now John Welch, who's a security supervisor at Fenway Park, who just through the normal course of coming and going, I've known for over 20, 25 years. And so here I am, a sports guy, getting to know these people, and of course they suffer from this devastating illness, and it just seemed like an appropriate time to sort of put it all together and write about where they are right now in their lives.
Now, you spent a lot of time with the Frates family. Can you talk about where they are in their journey with Pete now?
Well, I mean, there is no like rounding third or at 11 o'clock hour or any of that, because there's two things about the Frates family that always jump out at me. One is they're embroiled optimism, and that they continue to fight the fight. There is no giving up. And the other thing is they are incredibly savvy people, which starts with Pete. Pete was diagnosed in 2012 and immediately huddled his family together and said, this is an opportunity. You can actually make the argument that Pete and his family and his group, the Freight Train, has done more to raise awareness for ALS than anybody in history. And I include Lou Gehrig in that simply because obviously the disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is named for Lou Gehrig, and he will forever be the name that we instantly identify. But the reality is that at the time that Lou Gehrig was afflicted, and they had the famous July 4th, 1939 event at Yankee Stadium, the luckiest man speech, and so forth. But a lot of people at that time did not know that he was dying of ALS. Some did. They thought that he had an illness that would be chronic, that would prevent him from baseball, but not a lot of people at Yankee Stadium really knew he was dying of ALS. And that came out later on. And obviously the legend of Lou Gehrig has rightly so grown over the years. For Pete, literally hours after diagnosis to become what he's become is truly an epic story in the ALS story.
And you are highlighting some other stories, as you mentioned, John Martin and John Welch, two other extraordinary individuals who have had an impact locally here. Can you talk about them a little bit?
John Martin is a videographer. He likes to call himself cameraman because that's the old-timey term. At Nesson, he's a good friend of mine. I make no bones about that. Just as he's a good friend of everybody in the media. I mean, that's just the kind of guy he is. He's a guy that knows he knows all the backstories, he knows all the gossip, he's always had an opinion about everything, and that's what's made him a very special person in the Boston media. So he's got ALS, and you know, those of us who put on the old-time baseball game, there's a whole bunch of people in Cambridge who put that game on. I help out. Pedro Martinez was in the game last year, and the game was done as a benefit for ALS with John Martin in mind, and John came to the game. And now there's the Cafe Martin, which is basically the front stoop of this house.
If you've seen those, and you've seen several people in the media wearing those hats at Gillette or Fenway or anywhere.
And so he's come out of his shell a little bit, and then the third guy is John Welch, born and raised in Somerville, and lives in Medford now. He's been a security guy at Fenway for years, and he has ALS. His son Johnny played independent minor league baseball for 6 or 7 years, and their fight is just as poignant and just as sad and just as inspiring.
What do you most want people to take away from these columns as they read them?
That ALS is an equal opportunity employer, that it doesn't It doesn't pick and choose. It's interesting that John Martin told me that the first he ever really thought about ALS was shooting a Pete Frates event. And that John Welch talked about being at Fenway for a Pete Frates event, and they're thinking about ALS, and then, oh, now I have ALS, and that's the power of Pete, and it does put people to thinking about this, and if it can affect these two people as it has, and they said we were aware of it because of Pete Frates, and just the fact that so many millions of dollars has been raised for the general fight for ALS, and it's a sobering lesson for us all.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, Buck, thank you so much for sitting with me today, and you can read Steve Buckley on bostonherald.com or, of course, in our paper edition.
Yes.
Thanks again.
Thank you.